So the past 24 hours have been very interesting for Nintendo Switch fans. Yesterday, we of course made a video talking about how the Taiwanese-based newspaper Economic Daily News reported that a new Nintendo Switch model is being planned for early 2021. Since then, there's been an interesting thing with the translation of that report, alongside with another report, this time from Bloomberg, and now it seems like some people are under the impression that this isn't going to be a Nintendo Switch revision, but actually a successor to the current Nintendo Switch. Now, of course, all of this is really based on speculation on these reports and opinions, which no opinion is really right or wrong, but I basically want to update you guys on what's being said with this information and decide whether or not which is a huge key word here, if a new Nintendo Switch is indeed in development, why it isn't a successor, but an upgrade to the current model. What's going on, guys? I'm RGT85. If this is your first time on the channel, be sure to hit that subscribe button. But without any further ado, let's get into the nitty-gritty about these reports and give you guys my opinions on what I think about them. So like I said, all of this is stemming from a report yesterday that we talked about on the channel. If you haven't watched that video yet, make sure you guys go ahead and check that out. Basically, a Taiwan-based newspaper, Economic Daily News, claimed that a new Nintendo Switch would enter production later this year, 2020, with a launch planned for Q1 of 2021. Now, according to this publication, the new Nintendo Switch model will feature upgraded interactivity and an improved display quality when in handheld mode. The report does cite various hardware manufacturers responsible for the Nintendo Switch flash storage, Joy-Con controllers, and more. And like I said, we sort of dove into that topic, but since then there's actually been another report that has come out, and this time it's from Bloomberg. Now, this report came out late last night, about 11:30 p.m. Eastern time, and Bloomberg kind of goes along with what the Taiwanese report is saying, but actually adds a little bit more to it. Now, this report is coming to us from Takashi Mochizuki, and basically in their report they say the specifications of the new machine have yet to be finalized, although the Kyoto-based company has looked into including more computing power and 4K high-definition graphics. People briefed on the strategy told Bloomberg News, asking to not be identified because it's private. The release of an upgraded Switch would be coupled with or followed by a slew of games from Nintendo itself and related outside studios, the people said. Those games would address a wide range of players, from casual gamers seeking small doses of escapism to more devout fans putting in marathon gaming sessions. The focus on next year's pipeline explains Nintendo's relatively quiet software release schedule so far this year, the people said. So I think that report is interesting because it actually talks about 4K, which if you know anything about Nintendo, they don't really seem to care all that much about 4K graphics when it comes to their video games. A lot of their games are designed with 1080p or less in mind. A lot of Nintendo Switch games don't even run at 1080p in docked mode. When you factor in handheld mode, there are many sub 540p games running on the system in handheld mode. I do feel like a new display would be nice though, giving developers the ability to utilize the display in a bit of a better way. The max on the Nintendo Switch in handheld mode is of course a 720p display, so if they're able to get a 1080p display or even more out of that system when the system is in handheld mode, I think that would be a somewhat attractive offer for Nintendo Switch owners to maybe consider revising their Nintendo Switch if indeed this console is an actual thing that would be coming out in early 2021. Now, I know what you're saying to yourself, well, it seems pretty cut and dry here. Where is this whole next generation speculation coming from? Well, it actually comes from that initial report that we just talked about from Economic Daily News, because in that initial report, when translated, it does appear to say something about next generation. However, when you're going over the information that Mochizuki brought forth, there was no mention of a next generation stated, instead implying more of an upgrade to the current Nintendo Switch model. And of course, we have already seen an upgrade to the current Nintendo Switch model, just more along the lines of battery life. They revised the Nintendo Switch model, they released a new Nintendo Switch with better battery life. Of course, there also is the Nintendo Switch Lite. So would a next generation Nintendo Switch really make sense? Well, that's where we have to get into the nitty-gritty about this situation. The Nintendo Switch is turning 4 years old in 2021, March of 2021 to be exact. Now, of course, the Nintendo Switch is a hybrid system, meaning that while yes, it is a home console, which Nintendo usually has about a 5-year lifespan with their home consoles, 5 years plus when it comes to their home consoles, it's also a handheld console, which of course could potentially double that length of time depending on how Nintendo looks at it. When you look at something like the Game Boy lineup of systems, those things lasted forever. The DS, the 3DS, pretty much every handheld Nintendo system has had a much longer life cycle than a dedicated home console. And since this is a hybrid console, it really comes down to how Nintendo looks at this console from a consumer standpoint. Plus, you have to factor in the Switch is in such high demand right now that they're having problems keeping up with the manufacturing of the current Nintendo Switch and the Nintendo Switch Lite. So what benefit would there really be if you're talking about a next generation Nintendo Switch console? Now, of course, one of the things that's contingent on this is the fact that Sony and Microsoft are both releasing next generation consoles with the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X respectively this holiday season. Now, of course, these new systems are going to bring about major promises such as increased graphics, 4K, 60 frames per second, 120 frames per second. But how many of these games are actually going to realize the potential of these systems in the first year or two of the systems? Hell, when we're talking about Xbox games, we know that these games will be available on the Series X alongside of the Xbox One, and we're already starting to see reports that this will potentially throttle game development by having to put things on the Xbox One VCR. And while PlayStation has definitely done a great job announcing titles like Spider-Man, Ratchet & Clank, and the sequel to Horizon Zero, what's in the pipeline sort of beyond that? What is going on with Sony for the later half of 2021? When are these games even coming out? We know that Spider-Man is, of course, a holiday 2020 release date, but we don't know anything about Ratchet & Clank. We don't know a release for Horizon Zero Dawn sequel either. So when are these games going to be coming out? I honestly feel like 2021 is going to be a bit of a quiet year when these systems launch after the initial launches of titles. And with real-world situations impacting both consumers' bank accounts and business production, I would expect the gaming industry to start seeing that as well. We're already seeing it in 2020 with games that are currently in development. So by elongating the development cycle of these games, I feel like some of these games that we're talking about for the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X could be for the latter half of 2021 or even beyond that, talking about 2022 or 2023. But really, there's one major thing when talking about a Nintendo Switch console coming in 2021 as far as whether or not it is a revision to the current model or a next generation console that I think should just put a nail in the coffin in this discussion, because why would you release a brand new Nintendo Switch, a successor to your flagship console, when your current console is doing so well? Is it really worth potentially alienating the 60 million plus that have purchased your console in less than 4 years for the pursuit of a potential next generation experience? I mean, no way. If, and that is a big if, people, we do get a new Nintendo Switch model in early 2021, it would be a revision of the current model, not a replacement of the current model. There is no logical reason for Nintendo to do that. Implementing a Switch that's essentially overclocked potentially with a better display in handheld mode makes way more sense than replacing the current model of the Nintendo Switch we have now, because it would essentially be a premium consoles for those who want a bit more out of their Nintendo Switch. Plus, don't you think there would be developers with this new dev kit to be working on games for a system that is planned to launch in early 2021? Of course there would be. Yet you haven't heard a single peep from anyone about a next generation console coming to the Nintendo platforms in early 2021. And honestly, I've spoke with some developers off the record, and I have not had anyone say that there is a new dev kit, which would mean what, people? A revision. It is insane to me to think that Nintendo would literally announce and reveal a brand new Switch successor in 6 months or less, but some people do feel that it is on the table. So if a new Nintendo Switch console is potentially coming in early 2021, I definitely don't think it's going to be a next generation console. It's going to be something for me, something for you, someone who wants a little bit more out of their Nintendo Switch, an essentially premium experience with their console, much like we saw with the PlayStation 4 Pro and of course the Xbox One X. A little bit better, a little bit more faster, a little bit more clarity in your graphics, the potential for games to run better on these platforms, and of course still running on the current hardware that is already available on the market that over 60 million plus have already adopted. There's no rhyme or reason for Nintendo to release a new console to supersede the Nintendo Switch so early in the Nintendo Switch's life cycle. 2-3 years from now, sure, we could talk about something like this, but for right now, if indeed a Nintendo Switch is coming in 2021, it's going to be a revision, not a new console. Alright, so that is going to do it for today's video. Let me know what you guys think of this in the comments section down below. If a new Nintendo Switch is indeed coming in Q1 of 2021, is it going to be a revision or a next generation console? Was this a simple mistranslation, or is there something more to it and I'm just completely wrong and you watch me be wrong for an entire video, which, I mean, that would be kind of embarrassing. But thank you guys for checking out this video. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section down below. And like I said, if you are new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. Check out other videos on the the channel as well, be sure to check out yesterday's video where we initially talked about this story and see if what I have to say today is pretty much in line with that. And as always, guys, I will catch you guys on the next video. Later.